Can you build social fabric from scratch in new development, building from the ground up as part of thinking about that creation of community we've been talking about earlier? So hopefully that's what you're expecting. If not, you have to stay now, so because we've started. So disappointment. My name is Andrew Taylor. I'm Group Planning Director for Countryside Properties. So I've been asked recently what we do, because it just says countryside. So we do build homes and we build new communities, and we spend a lot of time on urban regeneration, redevelopment of a lot of estates in London and across the country, but also larger scale new communities. And our interest here is about thinking about our role as a developer in the creation of new communities or the restitching of existing fabric, the role we play, and the role we need others to play in that. So we have a selection of speakers who are sort of talking around that topic. A lot of people see our role as part of the consultation, the engagement through the planning application process, and a lot of developers, you know, it's true, sort of see that as very limited, and then they build the homes or they build boxes and then they depart. And their role is not broader than that. And I think for us, we spent quite a bit of time thinking about the broader role, or the broader, at least the facilitation role we have to create communities and support them. Now that will be all the way through the planning process, but through the construction phase, and then thinking about how that continues after we've left and after the developments continue, to make sure that that cohesion is developing and is there as part of that process. We may be building completely new communities with nothing to build on. We may be restitching communities. We may be, you know, working in small villages or larger towns or cities as part of that. So there's a whole different way and different fabric of how we do that work. And therefore, from our perspective, there isn't one size that fits all as part of it. It's about the narrative, the local narrative to that change, and how you work with that. And we've heard a lot about that this morning in terms of the impact of towns and how you work with those local groups within towns to create that change and that difference. But we focus on a few key themes, which is about the community and building on that existing community and using those people to tailor those solutions to the need in that local area, which could be about economic growth, training, skills. It could be about community prosperity and resilience. A lot of the time, when we're talking about creating new communities, it can actually be about building bridges between existing communities and new communities, and about how you integrate people over a period of time. I don't know how many here were in London on Tuesday, but there was a lot of talk about trust. And trust in the development industry is probably not particularly high, and how you build that trust through the whole process of development from day one all the way through is an important part of understanding the role communities and individuals have as part of the role in creating that community, and what they can and what they cannot have an influence over. So we have 4 speakers. Hopefully, we have Charles Marohn, who's joining us from America. Hi, Charles, who is founder and president of Strong Towns, which is an organisation that's seeking development that is financially strong and resilient, and also safe and livable and inviting. So thinking about that development, so obviously from an American perspective, but obviously thinking about how that translates here as well. We then have Cany Ash. Cany's an architect, co-founder of Ash Sakula Architects, but talking about the participatory architecture and how the adaptive use and thinking about the economies and how people interrelate with that architectural process. 2 different perspectives again. So Theresa Ferguson, former chair, but speaking obviously with a lot of history about the chair of the Community Association at Nansledan, so a new community on the edge of a town in Cornwall, and acting as that resident's voice and as part of that development and taking it through the process. And then lastly, Brian Dawe, who established Safe Regeneration, so we'll talk about that, thinking about the fostering growth of creative and community-led social enterprises. So a little bit about, we've been talking about that earlier, but about how that can facilitate the public activities as part of new development. So we're going to go straight over to Charles, who's going to do his 5-minute speech, and then we're going to run down in the order that I just, and then we'll have time obviously for questions and discussion, hopefully, unless everyone takes a very long time. But Charles, over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. I will probably keep my screen turned on and off so I'm not the disembodied head hovering over all of you, but I appreciate the opportunity to share some ideas with everyone. Of course, my perspective is a United States perspective. I've had the joy and the pleasure of being in your country a number of times, and it's a little humbling for me to sit here and try to talk to you about this, because I feel as if you are superior to us in many ways, in terms of building community and in terms of building places that people, endear to people, that people want to be part of. Here in the United States, after World War II, what was sold to people was community. It was this idea of kind of an instant place that would be better in many ways than the messiness they were living in before. The pre-Great Depression city was a historic kind of amalgamation of many people coming together in the types of cities that I think you are much more familiar with than what we experience here, particularly as you get further west in the United States. The development pattern at the end of World War II was not very mature. And so a lot of this got torn down, and we have kind of an instant city built around our large cities, built around our small towns, the whole suburbanization effect. But I think in thinking about this particular topic, if we go back and we look at the marketing brochures of the time, we look at the little TV shows, the way this shift was made, it was all made around the idea of building instant community. Places that, and I'm going to describe it in this way, had a lot of the messiness gone, a lot of what I'm going to call humanity kind of stripped out of it, and brought it down to its consumer essence. You could have a nice home with a nice lot, a little bit of property yourself, a car, maybe 2 cars. You're going to have a nice school. You can volunteer on the Parent-Teacher Association. And I think most importantly, particularly when it comes to the marketing brochure, you can be in a neighborhood with people who would be very similar to you, people who would have your similar maybe point in life. So if you have kids, you can be with kids. If you are older and retired, you can be with people who are older and retired. There was certainly a racial and a demographic makeup to this. This idea fit very, very well with where we were at the time, because what we were trying to do as a country, and to a degree, I think you see this in the UK as well, we were trying to stay out of the Great Depression. We were trying to build places very, very quickly in order to keep our economy going and, in a sense, not return to the depths of the Great Depression as we demobilized all these people at the end of World War II. When we look back at this period of time, what we recognize is that we built places that may have had kind of an instant, again, I'll go back to that word messiness, communities without the messiness, kind of a nice veneer of place. But without that messiness, without that humanity, these places have struggled to endure. They've struggled to be places we cared about. They struggled to be places that we were passionate about. They struggled to be places that we identified with beyond just the consumer functionalism of them. It's a place to live. It's a place to transact, that kind of thing. And so as we look back at the places we built in the 50s and 60s, the places we built in the 70s and 80s, these different cycles of building have really struggled here in the United States. They've struggled to endure. They've struggled to maintain their value. They've struggled to be places that we invest in. And of course, from a strong town standpoint, they have failed to thrive in the sense that they're not creating enough tax base and wealth to actually justify and validate their ongoing maintenance. This is a huge problem that every US city is experiencing right now. And so I do feel like the challenge that we face, the challenge that we have, is not only how do we build new places that have some of that human messiness in it, because I think it is that messiness that binds us to each other. It's the idea that we would have multiple generations living in a place, that we would have people of different income levels and different demographic backgrounds, that we would, in a sense, over time, become more and more bonded to each other as humans, more so than just as consumers at a certain place in our life cycle. How do we do that in the new places that we build? And I think even more importantly here in the US, how do we go back and allow our existing places to mature and attain that kind of cohesiveness? I do think that this is one of the main challenges today. And you overlay that, particularly here in the US, with a lot of deep cultural conversations about who we are, what our place in the world is, what it means to be an American. I think about my hometown, and if we go back 100 years ago, I am of Norwegian descent. I like to joke that we had a lot of diversity. We had Norwegians and Swedes and Finns all here living harmoniously in one community. Of course, our cultural diversity is a lot more today. Some of those old things that used to bind us together no longer do. And the question becomes, what is that overlay? And so I'm enthused to hear from all of you. I got to meet a little bit of the panel here in a session earlier, and obviously some people doing some very accomplished things. So I will pause and listen, and if I can add anything to the conversation, please call on me in a bit. Thank you so much.
Charles, thank you very much, and I love your human messiness bit about communities. Cany, we're going to go straight over to you. Cany has got a few slides, so I think they're hopefully coming up, and then Cany's going to talk to them as well. Over to you.
Well, it's great to be in this conference today because it's such a big, messy, complex, diverse slice of people working on strong towns. Charles, I would say that some of the things that we can learn from you guys in the States, maybe you can see in this slide. I'm very interested in breaking down the walls around our English privet hedge and front garden and thinking about, I haven't gone to the next one yet, sorry. And thinking about how we sit out a bit more and we connect a bit more and we create more transparency through our homes and we have a lower threshold, if you like, into visiting each other casually and continually, and this builds up some resilience. So I think that if this image is like just a bench, can create a gathering place for kids to meet each other before going out on an adventure, that same bench can work in so many different ways. And we need to find these small physical devices to make these resilient networks happen. And on the next slide, just brought up maybe 3 things which I know that this conference is very interested in and certainly matters to us. One is we don't want any more innovative visions of cafe culture and clearing up old industrial towns and making them Yorkstone paved and nice. We want continuity. We want the businesses to continue. We want the people to continue and to keep that thread through. The second point is really about the fact that the property industry, the whole construction industry has been very much siloed into the idea of different sectors. So you have resi for residential, and you have office, which is now breaking down into Class E. Some people know that some of this old science, if you like, has been thrown out with globalization, with the Brexit, with the pandemic, and that's quite refreshing. But I think we really need to work harder to think about all built fabric as very much our kind of quarry to make new places. We shouldn't be knocking down any more buildings. We should really just think differently. All the buildings that we build, they should be called 200-year buildings, not put into one of those silos. And the last thing is really always thinking about the local economy and building around the cluster of old places, building on the success, the compost heap, if you like, of success. So next slide, please. I've just done 2 cartoons here of 2 different visions of how you plan for new communities. So this one is by the housing professionals. And if you read the comments as they go around the table, they're all terribly sensible and they really do get to the heart of what it takes to deliver a suburb. But if you go to the next slide, because that's the market product, if you go to housing as a culture that grows, you have a slightly different approach. And it doesn't necessarily take longer, it's not necessarily less efficient, it's just basically that you're grounding in people's desires and their aspirations. And those obviously change from when they're little kids, you know, to when they just want somebody next door to chat to. But overall, if we do something called loitering with intent, which is we're just listening hard and getting a sense of what people mean in an area, what community means to them, what living together means. So next slide, please. I've got one case study that I'm going to run through, and it's in Newcastle, and it's got an incredible topography. It's a little river valley called the Ousburn, on the edge of the city centre of Newcastle, and it's almost like the cultural centre of Newcastle for music, certainly, and for theatre, and for there's the Museum of Childhood and the Story Museum, and a city farm. It's just a very, very rich place. But we had a site where we were asked to put 70 homes on a 0.6 hectare site. Could I have the next slide? Sorry. And it looked like this. It was the area off to the right of this picture. And it was assumed, because actually what you can't see, it's very steep at that point, that it would be a block of flats. Next slide, please. And this was what was planned. But what we wanted to do is wanted to connect to the wealth of streets and communities around the site. So we wanted to build streets, and we wanted those streets to open up. Next slide, please. We wanted those streets to open up to the river and to be part of the messy human character of this very intriguing valley. Next slide, please. So this was a model that we built just pre-planning, and I think that people sort of really took this model to heart, and we had some really good evenings in pubs with people where they started planning to be each other's next door neighbours, and talked about the value of micro allotments and sitting out spaces and where the sunsets were going to be, and how to draw people down from the Biker Wall, Ralph Erskine's famous housing estate just up the hill from there, how to love the music club so much around there that the ear-splitting sound on a Sunday afternoon wasn't going to be a problem. Next slide, please. And we made a riverside walk. So here it is built. Now, every single home here has got its own front door. And so it's 100% net to gross. And the beauty of that is that people meet each other in the public realm. So they're not squirreling way down corridors. There's a lot more activity on the street, and people really do know each other. And although this is, not 10 years old, it's very much a community. Next slide, please. And part of it is just a bit like the bench at the beginning. It's just making some incredibly modest excuses for people to get together. So in the winter, they go to the pub and they discuss what they're going to plant in the 2 square meters of allotment, and it's at the back of people's gardens, but you can come in and sit out there. And then I've got 2 more slides, which is just after people had kind of settled, we went back and did this project called People of the Mailings. The place is called The Mailings, and you can go online and look up peopleofthemailings.co.uk, and you can listen to them talking about their housing and what they like about it, and the oddities of it, if you like. And because of that, people started meeting each other who hadn't actually met in the street. It was quite a modest project. We were up there for like 2 or 3 days, and then maybe we spent 2 weeks putting it together. But these kind of projects don't happen enough, those kind of revisits. And the thing is like these people, she's doing a PhD on Cicero's sense of public space, and he is a stunt motorbike you know,
Stuntman.
stuntman. And he was showing us all his kind of leather jackets and things. And they loved jumping up onto their water butt, which we fought to clad in wood, because it was thought, well, why would you need to do that? Just leave it green plastic. But they sit there and they get the last of the sun. And it's those kind of things that give you confidence as an architect or anybody planning housing that some things are worthwhile. And last slide. These people are brilliant. It's really worth going online just to hear them, because they say that the house stopped them arguing. And when you listen to them, you know, these little clips, you can hear them arguing about how, or if the house stopped them arguing, but then they agree that it did. So that's more than you can ask for as an architect. Thank you.
Cany, thank you. That's wonderful. And I love the benches idea that you came back to. I did involved in a scheme in Cambridge, and actually just designing the bin stores at the front of the house with an integral bench actually made people sit outside. It was quite interesting in terms of some of that change of character. I'm not sure we'll have time for a post-occupation evaluation, POE, which is sort of what the video is, but that's a completely separate and lovely topic to go in. Theresa, let's come to you. Talk about your work in Nansledan and what you've done as part of your community.
Okay, I think I'm on.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me today, first and foremost. I've had my eyes opened coming round Halifax, an absolutely stunning place. Amazing. Just sort of a brief introduction to myself. Obviously, I don't come from Cornwall, but I live in Cornwall. It was a choice to sort of move down to that particular area. I come from a little place called Nansledan, which is on the periphery of Newquay in Cornwall. And the estate itself is one of the Duchy of Cornwall's developments. You've got Poundbury, and Nansledan's the next venture that Prince Charles is on at the moment. My role within Nansledan started back in the late 2017 when I first moved into Nansledan, and I attended a meeting. It was on the Facebook page, come and meet the Duchy, come and meet some of your residents, etc. Went along. They started talking about getting a residents association pulled together, and so some ideas were thrown across the table. I put some ideas across the table myself, and lo and behold, within about 2 or 3 months, I was approached and asked if I wanted to take on the reins and actually start the Nansledan Residents Association as it was then. But one of the things that I felt when I did a bit of research into what a Residents Association meant was that it seemed to be focusing mainly on residents, and it didn't involve the wider community, it didn't involve the businesses, it didn't involve the community outside of our community. So therefore, I felt the word community needed to be in the title, and we as a group had a long chat about it. We put the actual process out into the community itself, and they also liked the idea that we would call ourselves a community association rather than a residents association, because it was all encompassing, and we felt it was really important for the whole community to be involved in what we were on our adventures in Nansledan. So we were building from the ground up. We had nothing. We had no bank account, we had no members, we had nothing to begin with. So it was a case of, we decided that our first year would be the foundation year to build the Nansledan Community Association. So we had a group of about 4 or 5 residents, volunteers. We got together, met regularly on a monthly basis. Our task, we set ourselves objectives for the year, which was to build a website, which was to open a bank account, which was to raise some funds, all the sorts of things that was going to put us on that journey, so that when we came to our first AGM, we would have a foundation for the proper committee to actually, the voted committee, the committee that the people within the community wanted to be part of running that association. We would have a foundation for them to build on. So we didn't have any money, and we thought to ourselves, I looked at how residents associations work. We realised that we've also, within Nansledan, we also had the makings of, or it wasn't the makings, it was part of the process of buying the house. You had a management company where you paid management fees. We then looked at what do the management company do and how does that impact on what the community association would do. So we decided that there needed to be a bit of a split there. We would work together in some respects, but generally the management association would deal with the business side of things. They would deal with buying the bins, cleaning the areas, refreshing the lampposts, all the sorts of things that we pay management fees for. And the Nansledan Community Association, we would deal with the fun stuff. We would deal with the stuff that I really like, because I like that and I like getting out and about and meeting people. So can you remember as a child where you could walk out of your street and you knew everybody in your street, and you could leave your doors unlocked and you could go into Mrs. Tanner's next door and get a cup of tea or even a whole meal? You remember that? We wanted to bring that back to Nansledan, and actually we're well on our way to doing that, because you can walk down the streets in Nansledan and you know the majority of the people that are there within Nansledan, and everybody knows each other. The types of events, the first year was actually quite difficult to get people to come on board, because everybody was new, everybody was a little bit sceptical about what what the finances were going to be, how much was it going to cost them. So we set a figure, £10 a year. We set it up, put it out there. Within 2 months, we still had no members. So we thought, what are we going to do? So I came up with this brainwave overnight. I went to the Duchy and I says, do you think it would be possible if you were to pay everybody's first fee for that first year? If we've got 100 houses, that's about £1,000, £10 each per household. Would you be willing to pay for that, just to get the membership in? And then thereafter, everybody else pays it, because we'll be able to see the benefits of what their £10 was going to get them for the year. The Duchy said, absolutely. What we'll do, it's June, you've got till November, get as many members. Whatever members you get, we will pay their fees. So we went back and we re-advertised it. Who says the Duchy's going to pay it? Overnight, we went from no members overnight to just over 75 houses had joined. It was £10 per household. No matter how many people were in that household, we had £750 in the bank, which was great. So therefore, we had to start off money to buy ourselves a summer barbecue, money to buy ourselves selection boxes at Christmas, Easter eggs at Easter. We had the basics of bringing the community together. We've run events every year since, and each event, as it grows, as the community grows, is getting bigger and it's getting more fun. We have COVID. We are in isolation. How do we continue to bring the community together when everybody is in isolation and we can't go any further? Thankfully, we've got the internet. Thankfully, we've got the processes of communicating through the internet. We held virtual events. We had a virtual Nansledan's Got Talent, believe it or not. We asked the community to go and video their talents, put it onto the website, and then the community would judge it. We had a judging poll, and we had the winners, and we had the Nansledan's Got Talent, which again brought the community together, even when we weren't able to see each other face to face. Those are the sorts of things that we get involved in, and those are the sort of things that we continue to do. And next week, we've got a massive big street party for the Jubilee. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. And I really quite like when you're talking about the stuff about the wider community, and not just sort of looking inwards in terms of the new homes, and how you connect to both the businesses but also existing community, and how you start to restitch, or rather stitch your new community into the existing one.
Right, and it's also worth noting, I forgot to mention, that both the Duchy and the different developers on the estate are a big part of that community as well. We sponsor lots of the things that we do, so we're a really combined group, and all the businesses do as well, so it's really good.
Brian, let's come to you and your contribution.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting us. My name is Brian Dawe. I'm the CEO of Safe Regeneration. Safe Regeneration is on the cusp of delivering a £45 million community-led regeneration project in Bootle, which is a deprived area just on the edge of Liverpool, Docklands area. But it started 20 years ago. 20 years ago, as a group of creatives, artists, musicians came together, and we're just a little bit fed up of being done to, and so we organised ourselves to start to do things in the community. It might be create public artworks, it might be put an event on, drama, it didn't matter. It was about connecting people through the arts. Things kind of accelerated quite a bit for us when we moved into an old school. It was supposed to be for 6 months, peppercorn rent, to deliver a sculpture trail on the canal. The site that we sit in now is canal side. And we've always looked at it and thought, this is a gem. This really needs to be cared for, looked after and taken care of. So we began to use that site and utilise that site to deliver bigger projects, got more ambition. We've got a canoe club, and so we work with the local schools and local families to paddle up and down, firstly, for some exercise, but we also give litter pickers, and we clean the canal as we're doing it. So we moved into the school 2006. By 2012, we were aware of the situation of artists going into spaces, animating it, creating some life. Then the developers come in and go, thanks very much for doing that work. Now can you just move along and let us get on with the real proper regeneration stuff. So we managed to convince Lloyds Bank, funny enough, to give us £300,000 to buy it. I still don't know how we did that, and it shocks me even to say it. But a high street bank looked at a gang of artists in the school and went, yeah, we'll give them a go. So that was a game changer. As you imagine, we were a stakeholder. We couldn't be moved along. We couldn't be kind of disregarded in any way. And so next to us, there was a piece of land the council owned, a piece of land the River Canals Trust owned, and an old pub. This old pub was beginning to fall into disrepair. It was really hanging on. Our community said to us, can't you do something about that? That's what you do, isn't it? You do that kind of thing. The last thing I want to do was own a pub in the middle of Bootle, trust me. But it was definitely the most amazing thing we've ever done. We convinced Power to Change to give us the funding to purchase that pub. That pub now is the centre of everything we do. We say it's not a community centre, but it's definitely the centre of our community. And so all of the work that we do is connected through that. And when we started to vision what we could do in that space, it's a 6-acre site. When we started doing that vision work and say, what would it be if we got a chance to design a neighbourhood, what would it be like? And we purposefully, the first kind of architectural drawings we did, we put a big block of flats where the pub was. There was an uproar, but that's exactly the reaction we wanted. You can't knock our pub down. So it was great, right, you're in. And so just to talk about our governance, there's a charity that sits at the top, and then now there's a cluster of different organisations that sit underneath that. One is a community interest company that acts as our developer. We had a number of conversations with developers, and they were kind of, yeah, okay, so we come in, we build the houses, we own the land. It was like, no, we want to own the houses. We want to shape what exactly is happening here. So that development company now acts on behalf of other community-led projects across the city region of Liverpool, which is another story. So we began to design out this project. We submitted our plan application, which cost close to £1 million in February 2020. That was rejected because we didn't have enough parking, apparently, because they wanted 2 car parking spaces so every dwelling in an area where only 5% of people own 2 cars. So we were and still are kind of completely mystified by that process. So we dusted ourselves off. It was a bit of a blow, we have to be honest. And then we put up a fundraiser, a crowdfunder, to raise the funds to support us to take that appeal forward. That appeal happens in a month's time. We engaged the QC at the very beginning of that to give us some sort of opinion on how successful that might be, the likelihood of that success. It's fairly high. In fact, we're very confident. We can't be complacent, but please say an extra prayer for us tonight if that's okay. So as I said, we're on the cusp of delivering that now. We've established a community land trust that will actually own the houses on completion. 123 Development Company will continue to develop other opportunities for communities across the city region. But the thing that's made that happen is the continued activity in the area that we've delivered. We've run major music festivals with audiences of 5,000 people, just continually engaging, continually pushing it out. Our structure is as I said, it's a charity, but we have a stakeholder membership of 250 people across those groups of companies, and they all feed back and forth through that kind of mechanism of governance. I think I've touched on everything, but yeah, that's probably, I'll leave it there. But yeah, 2 months away from appeal.
Oh, that's well, not the appeal, but yeah, that's great, because I was going to say, we're not the appeal bit. And it's quite interesting between the two of you, the impact of finance as a starting catalyst to be able to buy your barbecue, to be able to buy something and have that ownership and control and be able to have that decision-making process. Completely different amounts of money, but it was that start of that process. Cany, I'm going to come to you first with a question, if I may, which was thinking about what we've just heard slightly, and you were talking, well, you talked about compost heap, and I'm continuing that analogy, and the fertilisation that you do in your early work or through the engagement consultation process to fertilise the new community in terms of allowing things to develop, whatever that might be. And I don't know if you want to add further to, using your case study, add further to that in terms of the work you've been doing.
Yeah, I think that there is an idea that there's a lot of time that's lost in development where, through cycles of the economy or through the way that partnerships are working, which could be captured and used to build, this is an amazing story that you just told. And I think it's because people trust things that have longevity. And at the same time, I think there's too much of an idea that development's not sexy unless it's instant. So we're great believers in building in an interim way on development. Even if you can't make it happen, the funding's not there and nobody knows quite what will work, you can register your local pub as an asset of community value. You can set up a community land trust for a pocket park even. There's a scalability to this that I think is an important stepping stones to developing some trust among local people, but also in terms of funding. When people come and they see something as real, that's it's very encouraging, and they can start imagining it. So does that? Yeah, no,
thank you. Charles, I want to come to you. Oh, you've got your hand up as well, so I didn't see that. I just looked at you. Charles wants to come to you anyway, and you're very happy to comment on that. But you also mentioned something about maturing communities and the change over time that you see. And I'd be interested in further, you unpacking that a bit more in terms of what you've seen in America and some of your communities in terms of that to become messier rather than the single homogenous groups that you described to start with.
Yeah, I feel like there's a big question here about the intersection of finance with the messiness part of it and how we go about delivering community. What we see here in the US, if we go back a generation, what we see is that a lot of what we built was very responsive to what could be financed and what people could get into. In other words, what we were delivering were products that had a marketplace. Obviously, every product we deliver has to have a marketplace, but we were most sensitive as builders. We were most sensitive as people delivering, in a sense, this notion of community or place. We were most sensitive to what was easily financeable. So the products that we would come up with were products that were geared towards people with a high credit rating, people who were able to get into, a home at a certain price point. And what happened is that our market became very homogenous. We delivered one product, really, and we delivered that one product really, really well, the single family home at a certain price point. There were some modest variations on that. And everybody else, in a sense, had to trickle down within the market. If you were at a lower price point, you would get someone's house from 30 years ago that was kind of falling apart and in a less desirable place. If you were at a higher price point, maybe you could get a custom home built or what have you. But it was essentially a mass produced at a certain price point or a certain product, because that is what was easily financeable. I think we've actually gone to the next step now, and it's another step divorced from what's going on the ground. That step is where we are now selling things, we are now building things, we are now most interested in things not that people can get into easily, but that creates the kind of paper, and I'm talking about financial products that can be easily financialized, that can be easily securitized with other products. And so there's a certain menu of things, whether it is the big super block, the large apartment condo complex, the single family home. These things are products that we live in and that are delivered into a marketplace. But even more important to the functioning of our economy today, they're paper that can be traded on a secondary market, can be securitized, and what have you. I think there's an open question today on whether we're actually here in the United States building community or whether we're actually building financial products. The reason I think this is important is because that has a certain top-down nature to it, right? Being driven by the finance. When I see people be very successful building and delivering great products that also create great community, it tends to start not with what is financeable, not with what is easily financeable, but with where people are. Like, where is this community at? Where is this place at? What are the existing people here struggling with? How do I deliver that? And then the next question becomes, how do I get it financed? How do I pay for it? How do I make it work financially? As opposed to, what is the financial product that Wall Street is asking for? And how do I go out and deliver that in a way that has a secondary market? And I do think that's a very important distinction. It's one that we're struggling with here quite handily, because our economy is very centralized and very top down in that way.
Charles, thanks for that. And I'm going to pivot slightly. And I'm a planner, and this one's for you, Sam Stafford. We were talking about town planning earlier, and effectively this is the structure that we work within. And I'm intrigued slightly with quite two different stories here between Theresa and Brian. So, and I'm not saying yours has worked and yours hasn't, but I'd be interested you were talking right at the end, you said you've got a good working relationship with the Duchy, so they're acting as master developers, and you've got a good relationship with the builders. And that's the bit that's interesting for me. And, you know, in terms of the people who are coming in and doing this thing, and then the relationship between you as the new community or existing community, and how did that work in terms of teasing that out, the different structures, the power, but the different levels of power between those different people, and how what I guess you feel as if you've made it work?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was down to just communicating, and I think initially there was this process where when the management company was just on the verge of being set up, there was nothing that was taking the residents' concerns to the Duchy, taking resident concerns to the builders around, you know, the concerns of the residents on snagging issues and all the other bits and pieces, the business side of it. So initially we had to take that part of it on board as well. But I think that communication process to ensure that the management structure was in place and that residents would be on the management committee, so that you had a separate set of residents who would take those concerns to the management company, so that they would speak on behalf of the community on the business side of it, and you then had the distinction between the business elements and therefore the more social community elements. But then the actual joined up approach was when we regularly met with the Duchy every 2 months. We would have our own meeting monthly. We'd then meet with the Duchy, and the Duchy would have representatives from the management company and the builders, and we would discuss what sorts of things was important to be delivered. For instance, one of the things that the Duchy were very keen to do was build on the, you could say, mistakes of Poundbury. What they didn't do in Poundbury, how Poundbury went. Poundbury's, I think, it's over 25 years now. What they didn't build a secondary school till the very end. So therefore, they built a primary school in Nansledan straight away because they realised that was a big mistake. So it's learning from those mistakes. And I think what the consultation process in relation to building play areas, we're talking about bringing the community in to give their views about what they want those play areas to look like. And then that's for us, that was really, really important. The community thought, this is fantastic. We're actually being asked for our opinion on what we want that to look like. And also just the general structure of the building structure around the area. The fact that the streets are we call the shared pavements, and that in itself was a bit of a culture shock to a lot of people moving into Nansledan. So therefore, again, we went back into consultation with the builders and the duchy, but what can we do to make that more easy for people to understand and get their head round? So we started a safety programme, a road safety programme for the kids. But also, we also start to realise it isn't just the children that needs educating, it's the adults with the cars, those big metal boxes that can knock you over when you've got a pavement that goes right across your road. So there was all sorts of things that we got involved in, and they created the funding for us to allow to run those programmes. So we were working in collaboration. So far, we're still working in collaboration in everything that we do, and it works really well.
Yeah. And on the flip side, to me, planning is great. Planning is an art. It can deliver all sorts of a range of things. And unfortunately, sometimes it flicks into the technical and you've not ticked the right box in terms of providing a car parking, if that was the only thing, and you get knocked out. And I'm intrigued because, you know, I may be wrong, but in your 5 minutes, most people, I would say, thought what you've been doing was pretty good. You know, it's a good idea. It had a positive outcome for the community and the regeneration of that area. And yet, you weren't able to get, you know, the consent you needed to continue that work.
But that's because it was wrong. You know, this idea of the 2 car parking spaces, it's a dinosaur idea. Everybody should be really angry about that.
No,
The waste of your time and effort.
We are, but we have to kind of maintain a relationship with the council because we need to continue to work with them. And it's a council committee decision. So what we do is we pick ourselves, we dust ourselves off and we go, okay, let's keep trying to maintain positivity, keep smiling, it's the important thing, and get it over the line. I mean...
Get a miniature car for every household, you know.
Yeah, we thought that. But, you know, if you look at the scheme overall and its green credentials, we had like electric carpool built in, 5 cars. There's 2 train stations either side of the development, a bus station. The whole site is fossil fuel free, it's geothermal energy, and it's just like, and the council signed up to the climate emergency agreement as well. So you just think, well, there's obviously another reason here why this isn't being taken forward, but we have to keep smiling, we have to maintain our
I think
positive.
George knows a lot about this, actually, in Bristol.
So, I mean, just
I mean, it just sounds completely mad to me that it's got that far. You know, that is...
Sounds like an iconic project.
It is. It's Destination Boot
It
is the
should
name
be
of the
named
project.
and shamed. You know, that is absolutely, as Cany says, dinosaur. You should put Cany onto them.
there's, for those that aren't planners, on a Thursday night, so you've missed it this week, there's a Have I Got Planning News for You, which always has an interesting case of the week. So, you know, an interesting case coming up in terms of the appeal. But we've got 10 minutes left, so I wanted to there's a few hands already. I'll pass it out to people there with any, hopefully, short questions. Perhaps if you say, we'll go to the lady in green to start with. Perhaps you can say who you are and where you're from, and then your question. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Verity Ramsden. I'm Senior Development Surveyor at Historic England. The examples you've all given, which are all fantastic positive examples, it seems to me that the common denominator is a responsible landowner or developer who takes a real stewardship approach. Why do you think developers don't do that, and how can we incentivize them to do that? And as a sort of side question, how can we incentivize developers to do a real mix of housing, the bungalows for the elderly? Don't see that across housing estates, and as a result, we don't get that mix and that messiness about incentives, I suppose.
Anybody interested in picking that up? I was going to say going back to Cany's example, why was it that, you know, originally it was a block of flats and then they changed that? It's interesting in terms of that, how that process you went through in terms of, you know, thinking about the heritage of the area, and you were saying joining up the communities.
Well, there we were actually building on a Tyneside typology, which was the Tyneside flat, where you would have 2 front doors next to each other. All over the country, there are these typologies. But I think that the question about how can we incentivize developers, to be honest, I sort of feel like we've over-incentivized developers to to do the right thing, and they've got their design manuals and they've got their processes, and they've actually borrowed our language and your language, and to do this stuff. But there is no real need for bungalows. I mean, let's say people can live on the ground floor underneath a family, and that's a lovely mix. That's a nice messy mix, as Charles would have it. And so what we really need to think about urgently is, how do we compact new development, and how do we make sure that nobody needs a car to live somewhere? How do we get the cargo bikes and the last mile delivery working, and the little scooters, and just have fun? You know, the developments that are still going on, masses in the pipeline, which are in fields, which depend on 2 roundabouts. And we heard this morning about how, community capitalism was going to be relying on some roadworks, expanding some more tarmac. I suppose we need to think about what we want, what kind of life we want. We need to design the life we want before we start thinking about the hardware.
Brian.
I think we need to start to develop ethically led developers rather than trying to encourage developers that we have now. And that's what we've done. We've set up our own development company because we couldn't have a conversation with a developer that kind of understood what we were trying to do. So our conversation now is with other community-led projects is very easy, because there's a language there, and there's an honesty there, and there's a trust there, which is a word that's been used a lot whilst I've been here today. And that's what I believe is the most important thing. Because even when you start to think, we all know there's a real big opportunity with churches and community-led housing trusts at the moment. That conversation is a lot easier if it's coming from a community and it's coming from a position of trust and capacity as well. That's really important. We're not just saying we think we know what we're doing. We absolutely know what we're doing.
Questions? Yes.
My name's Richard Seaman. I lead the. I'm fascinated by your example Do you know what the sort of narrative was in the background within the local authority? Because it amazes me that one particular view has sort of held sway in that way. We discussions and the highway engineers feed in and they have a particular view, but there's mechanisms for resolving this. I mean, it's called leadership, basically. Was none of that evident?
No, we had a really positive pre-application meeting. It's a big scheme, so we worked for months up to a point, and the language just began to change as we got to the end of the conversation. And the only thing that changed, 2 things changed. We'd actually brought serious value to the land, because before it was just a disused space that nobody was using, and no one had no one recognised the value in it other than local people. And they appointed a new commercial director within the council. So that's, make your own mind up.
Well, let's not go down that too far. Any other questions? Right, we'll take the lady over there. Sorry, too many lights. Theresa, I'm interested in terms of how you that sort of thing in terms of the community cohesion as part of the new. I'm not saying there's antisocial behaviour in your community, but anyway, how has that developed as part of that new community and relating to the surrounding area?
Actually, there is a little bit of antisocial behaviour. You've all heard of knock door ginger, whatever it's called. That goes on quite a bit in Nansledan. But I think a lot of what we've been talking about isn't just about the developers. It's about the people that live there as well, and how they behave and how their behaviour affects everything that goes on round about the community that they live in. And minor crime is an issue in any town, no matter where you are, and you start to see little bits of graffiti going on. But it's about how the local community can work to address that, but not necessarily creating it as a big problem. And like, for instance, a classic example was just last week we had two young gentlemen knock on an individual's door, elderly couple. They say to them, we want to come and live with you because my mum's kicked me out the house. They say, sorry, you need to go back to your mum. There's a little bit of conversation took place. The elderly couple got quite nervous about it. The kids went away. They contacted myself because I used to be a police officer. So they're using the skills of what we did before we came to the community, and it's using those skills to sort of deal with the situation without actually calling the police. So I went round, had a look, found the lads, and managed to convince them to come back round to that elderly couple's house and apologise. And it was just a little bit of social justice where you just got them to apologise and understand where they went wrong. So there's lots of different things you can do as a community as a whole to make it safer. It's about looking after each other, looking after each other's houses when people are away on leave and holidays and things like that. It's the good old-fashioned stuff that we want to bring back to the community.
And I was going to pick up on that because one of the things that we do when we're working with partners, we do a lot of work with councils and housing associations, as I mentioned at the beginning, is you've got a core there of an organisation whose role it is to help manage that area going forward. And part of that is establishing early on the expectations of tenants or occupiers of properties, whether that's in the public or private sector, and enabling that social management of place and thinking about how you set those social norms early on as part of that to have this. One of the reasons I picked up on the post-occupation evaluation that sort of Cany was sort of talking about with the videos was about going back into places a year or two after the first occupation and understanding early on any issues or people's drivers and concerns, because if you can get it early on as part of that and you've got the structure there, the structure can therefore help, the structure through the management company or the structure through the housing association, you can then use that to help manage specific issues as they arrive, which might be that somebody hasn't cut their lawn, or it might be that the bins are kicked over, or it might be that graffiti you mentioned and things, and be able to deal with that as an early stage so it doesn't continue. I think you can do certain things through the design and of places so they're overlooked through designing out crime aspects and all those sort of, or the building for a healthy life aspect to make, encourage people to walk well and nice wide paths and things. But it's also about management. It's about that continual ongoing management, and you're never going to solve something, he said, by just designing something.
Can I add one thing to that? I mean, like last night coming from the train station, I actually came out of Peace Hall that way, and there was just a very long alley, and I got fascinated by the fact that there was no openings onto that alley. And it wasn't even just an alley, but it was a pedestrian way. So I do think that eyes on the street are important, and it doesn't have to be continuous. It's just, little windows which look in different directions. But I do feel that you can't design out everything. Like, you need a place for teenagers to hang out, and that needs to be part of it. And they don't want to be sort of eyeballed by everyone, but on the other hand, they don't want to be in some car court, pushed away. And there just needs to be a much, kinder and more inclusive attitude towards young people, the fact they need to meet. And I think that's often, seen as just a priori, a problem, when it isn't. It's just...
And on that, we need to draw this to a close, but the caring and kind nature, the trust you talked about, the joint working and sense of ownership and autonomy to be able to make decisions as part of community coming together. I think that's one of some of the core things in terms of building those communities from scratch. But thank you all very much. Can I ask you to thank our speakers, including